In this edition of Sightings, ufologists believe they were described in the Bible.
Then they did not call them UFOs, the so-called ancient gods, and today we call them aliens.
Have extraterrestrials returned to the Holy Land? Then, do spirits of the dead wander the site of America's bloodiest battle?
I believe the area is infested by ghosts.
Later, Bigfoot sightings increase in the Pacific Northwest and beyond.
It is almost on the edge of being unbelievable.
Also, a little girl is saved by angels.
It happened, so I could tell other people not to be afraid of dying.
Plus, a sightings update. The Earth wages war on human beings.
The problem is the average person on the street is not well enough informed to get worried about it.
And if there are no UFOs, why is there an official government policy for greeting extraterrestrials?
Welcome to Sightings. I'm Tim White. Enter a new location in the annals of UFO hotspots, the Holy Land. Since 1989, UFOs, crop circles, and alien beings have been sighted over Israel by a chief of police, law enforcement and military personnel, and civilians. The first-hand accounts, as told to our Sightings investigative team in Israel, bear an uncanny resemblance to encounters here, half a world away. For decades, ufologists have postulated that many biblical passages and ancient inscriptions may have been the ancient world's way of documenting UFO sightings and extraterrestrial contact. And now, those same researchers claim that there is new and compelling evidence that UFO encounters in the Holy Land are not just ancient history.
People who have been studying UFOs seriously have reached the consensus that the angels of the Bible are returning, and these are the aliens of Israel today.
The most recent UFO flap is occurring here, in a quiet rural area near the coast of Israel.
In March 1993, strange things began to happen in a little town called Kadima.
The strange things that Israeli ufologist Doron Rotem has documented have a familiar ring to American ufologists.
Between March of 1993 and June of 1993, there were at least 5 visitations in Israel. The first publicized landing was at Tziporet Carmel's backyard.
It was just amazing. And I looked at that site, and I thought to myself, what could this be?
The last thing Tziporet Carmel thought was that her home's backyard had been the site of a UFO visitation. It was not until 4 other women came forward, women who did not know each other and had not heard each other's stories, that Tziporet realized that she was part of Israel's greatest modern-day UFO encounter.
These are not women who have any ulterior motive whatsoever. They have nothing to gain by it.
It was a Saturday morning. I woke up very early. I looked at the alarm clock, and it was 6:30 in the morning.
I was asleep and woke up very early Saturday morning. I heard a loud bang. I was afraid to go downstairs and check it out. I preferred to wait until daylight.
It was 3 o'clock Saturday morning. I woke up with the noise of my dog barking. I went to the door near the window. Inside the house it was dark, but outside it was light. I opened the curtains and I saw a big giant image staring at me.
His face was more oval-shaped. His eyes were shiny like a stoplight, glittering. His nose was very small like a dot.
I tried to get to him. Instinctively, I raised my hand to push him away, but it was like pushing against a wall.
And all around, there were as if flickering lights.
He didn't say anything to me, but I heard a voice in my head. It was like telepathy. And the voice said, "Go away. I could smash you like a little dog. Go back to your husband."
And I got, so to speak, an answer in my head in English that this is the way it should be.
Before I could move, he disappeared.
We have 5 women who don't know each other describing the same bald-headed giants. They could have described little ones, green ones, red ones, humanoid ones. They had infinite possibilities of descriptions. They all described the same 7-foot, bald, round-headed creature.
And all 5 women found crop circles outside their homes within a few days of their experiences.
More than 59 crop circles of UFO landings were made between March and June 1993. Why? I don't know.
Around the circles was plenty of weed. I went there in the rainy season still, and there was plenty of vegetation. But in the circles themselves, there wasn't. There was just scraggly brown weeds.
The grass became, within a day, completely dry. It was before high as this grass all around, became completely dry, and eventually, after 2 or 3 days, lay down just like the way it's here.
And researchers discovered strange materials clinging to the dried crops.
There were strange red stains all over, and little pieces of unknown material that now we know it was a silicon. This is it. It's very light, it's very thin, and it's bright and glowing. We sent it to the National Geological Lab, to Dr. Henry Foner, who tested it. According to Dr. Foner's testimony, this specific material we are talking about here is a pure 99.8% pure silicon. It does not exist naturally on Earth.
When details of the Kadima encounter came out in the media, other residents in the area began to come forward with stories they had kept secret for several years out of fear of ridicule.
In 1991, Ellie Cohen, a young and ambitious businessman, was awoken one night when his house glowed from the inside.
I was standing near the kitchen window. I looked up and I saw an eye, a big eye with a light.
Ellie claims that the object appeared about 3 nights. Each night, about 3.5 hours. It was glowing, it was hovering, it was moving, it made no sounds, no hum noise, and whatsoever.
It was very clear that it was a disc. I didn't need anyone to convince me that it was something from outer space.
It's just like a Mexican hat-shaped object, must be about 30 meters in diameter, with a round big hole on the bottom. This is not a hoax, this is not a fake, this is a real UFO, and it matches by its size the size of the landing sites founded in Kadima 3 years later.
If extraterrestrials are trying to make contact, why Kadima and why now?
There's a huge radio antenna located in the middle of Kadima. Maybe it's because there's electricity in the antenna, maybe it's villages, I don't know.
Electromagnetism generated by the radio towers is similar to the type of energy measured within the crop circles. But the energy here appears to be stronger, causing instant physical effects in some of the women.
It was a feeling as if a very strange energy came literally through me and out of me, and then just evaporated.
And in January of 1995, the phenomena took a bizarre turn.
800 meters from the Kadima antenna tower lived a farmer called Amos Guetta.
We woke up one Saturday morning. We went to feed the chickens, the sheep, and the dog as usual. At 6:30 in the morning, when we woke up, it was already too late. All the animals were already dead, except the dog.
She opens his eyes and there are no eyeballs. 15 minutes later, the dog dies. She walks to her sheep pen, and there are 3 dead sheep. They have been shaved around the cheekbone and have had a hole drilled to the bone itself.
No blood was found either. We tried to cut the veins of the sheep. No blood was in it. They were empty of blood.
She goes on to the chicken house, where the chickens are literally frozen dead. No panic amongst the chickens. They're not scattered. They're in their roosts, dead. About 40 of them.
According to some ufologists in Israel, the significance of these events has not only scientific but also religious importance.
Israeli ufology is divided between rationalists and the mystics. The mystics believe that something extremely important is related to the landings?
Well, as one who has studied the Bible and to some extent a biblical scholar and a specialist on the ancient languages of the peoples of the ancient Near East, I became interested in the origins of their civilizations, and unintentionally perhaps I stumbled on the fact that ancient civilizations, the people at the time claimed that they were taught, they were given that knowledge by visitors to Earth from a neighboring planet. The difference between the interaction then and now was that then they did not call them UFOs. They knew precisely who was using them, who was flying, the so-called ancient gods. And today we call them aliens and are afraid of them.
The pattern of sightings in Israel continues. There have been additional reports of crop circles, UFOs, and cattle mutilations. We'll bring you more from the Middle East on an upcoming edition of Sightings.
Coming up next.
She grabbed my hand and we started to walk down the tunnel.
After a near fatal accident, a little girl's angelic vision saves her life.
Do angels exist? Well, according to a Time magazine survey, more than 2/3 of all Americans believe that they do. Skeptics argue that angelic visions are simply the brain replaying unconscious images absorbed through pop culture. For that reason, accounts of angelic visions by very young children take on greater significance. Their visions have not been polluted by the media, and what they are seeing is extraordinary.
She was lifeless. There was no life in the child whatsoever.
When Ricky first presented to the emergency department, I was almost sure that she would not survive.
I ran through the hall, and I knew something was wrong, and I found her floating face down in the pool.
My mom pulled her out, and she screamed for help, and there was nothing my sister and I could do.
It was such a difficult call because the parents of the child were very good friends.
October 21st, 1984. They only took their eyes off her for a second, but that was long enough for tragedy to strike the Enriquez family of Barstow, California. A poolside accident left 2-year-old Ricky paralyzed and in a deep coma. While her family prayed for a miracle, Ricky believes she briefly entered a world where miracles do happen.
I looked behind me and I saw a guardian angel, and she had flowing golden color hair and she was wearing a white dress. She grabbed my hand and we started to walk down the tunnel. When we got toward the end, she asked me if I wanted to go through the light with her or if I wanted to go back. And I told her that I had to go back and tell my mom where I was going. And so I remember her walking me back and telling me not to be afraid.
Soon after, Ricky opened her eyes and began to recover. Doctors did not know why, but Ricky did, and she told her mother about it.
It was approximately a month after she had come home from the hospital, and I had taken her shopping with me. We went into a bookstore, and maybe 5 minutes into shopping, she grabbed my hand and squeezed and started screaming and yelling in the store, "Mama, Mama, that's my angel." And I didn't know what she was talking about. I looked around, and there was a poster on the wall, and it was of a guardian angel.
Visions of angels are as real as any other human experience.
Dr. Melvin Morse is a critical care physician, author, and a leading authority on near-death experience in children.
My scientific studies on near-death experiences clearly document that near-death experiences are in fact the dying experience.
Dr. Morse believes that through the near-death experiences of children, we can preview the afterlife.
Children experience a spiritual light the great majority of the time during near-death experiences. And this is a loving, comforting light. It's not just some sort of reflex spasm of the optic nerve or the, dysfunctional firing of neurons in their occipital lobe. It's a light that one child said to me has a lot of good things in it.
It was a really fluorescent color tunnel. It had really bright colored bricks around it, and it had a really almost blinding light at the end.
While Dr. Morse believes that Ricky Enriquez had a vision of death, author Joan Wester Anderson has a different interpretation. She believes Ricky had what is known as a celestial vision of her guardian angel.
Angels appear to children, I think, because children are so open to the spiritual realm. In near-death experiences with children, about 70% of those involve the sighting of an angel, which is kind of interesting because adults only report 15 or 20%.
Anderson points out that the word angel comes from the Greek, meaning messenger.
The message that they get from these kinds of encounters is that their ordinary lives are filled with purpose and meaning. Typically, a child will say to me, "Gosh, I learned that I have a job to do."
When this first happened, we never went to church much. She had no knowledge of angels, really didn't know anything about it. Since this, she likes to spread the word that the angels are out there and it's okay.
I think that it happened so I could tell other people not to be afraid of dying.
Although Ricky, who is now 12, has not had another angelic vision, she feels that the presence of the angel is always with her, and her family feels its presence too. They believe that Ricky has new angelic qualities that were passed to her after her encounter.
Next, is Bigfoot on the move? Researchers discover a similar creature in the jungles of Brazil.
There is a horrible animal out there. They're terrified of this animal.
Since Sightings went online, our research capabilities have expanded dramatically. In a very real sense, viewers are becoming field researchers, alerting us instantly to sightings around the world. Recently, our in-depth Bigfoot investigation generated important new leads and exclusive photographs from the Pacific Northwest.
This is so extraordinary, so incredible, that something like a primitive man could exist in modern America. It is almost on the edge of being unbelievable.
Since Sightings' last report from Oregon's Bigfoot Research Center, Director Peter Byrne believes that new leads have brought him closer to solving the most persistent zoological mystery in American history.
What's encouraging to us is that the descriptions don't vary. The descriptions are the same.
Hundreds of new Bigfoot sightings have been reported to the center, and many of them offer clues about the creature's behavior and habitat. At least one sighting was made at a distance of less than 50 feet.
There were two women driving, and a place called Colton, south of here, and one crossed the road in front of them, about 6 feet tall, huge shoulders, short neck, and they said it walked very smoothly, didn't look at the car, crossed the road in 2 or 3 steps. People have seen the face. They say the face is a very human face. There's a straight nose, small lips, and it's not an ape's face, it's not a gorilla's face, a number of things like that. We think we're looking at a very primitive human.
Byrne is expanding his research team in an effort to calculate yearly food supply and seasonal migration patterns.
We're building up a volunteer force right now of people who'll be working with us. If we do find fresh evidence, like a fresh sighting, a sighting that's only a few hours old, we have a plan to bring in our volunteers, to bring in 2 helicopters and get video and pictures close up, which will be pretty good proof.
But on the rugged shores of Puget Sound, less than 200 miles from the Bigfoot Center, one man believes he already has that proof.
All the way up to the top of that mountain that day, we had the feeling we were being followed and watched. I saw this head move like that, or what I thought was a head, and I decided to take that picture.
On an expedition just weeks ago, Terry Mitchell took 2 photographs that many researchers believe are the most significant Bigfoot evidence since the infamous Patterson film taken in 1967.
I'm pretty confident that I've got a picture of a Sasquatch. All you can see is sort of a shoulders and the roundness of a head that looks like it's looking up the trail. If you take that picture and put it under a lens, you will actually see a face, a darkened face, with black hair looking right at the camera.
And at the same time Terry Mitchell was photographing his Bigfoot encounter, thousands of miles away in the Amazonian rainforest, researchers there were having a strikingly similar experience.
It had a large and thick tail, was covered with reddish and blackish hairs, had long claws, a monkey-like face. The fellow was absolutely terrified. Couldn't imagine what he'd seen.
Dr. David Orlin is a Harvard-educated research biologist working in South America. He believes that ancient legends about a creature called Mapengwe may be based in fact.
2 separate places, people were sent running away from what they considered to be this animal. The reports of this thing from all the far corners of the Brazilian Amazon, Venezuela, the Guyanas, Colombia, Peru, Bolivia.
Dr. Orrin has talked to many people who describe the Mapengwe as a creature who walks with backward feet. It stands over 6 feet tall, weighs more than 500 pounds, and according to one hunter, it is impervious to repeated blasts from a shotgun.
Consistently, people report that this creature has a very, very bad smell, and then it affects the nervous system. People describe themselves as being disoriented, intoxicated, and there are 3 separate cases in which people are stated to have become mute for the rest of their lives after getting a large dose of this. Many of the people who give you these first-hand accounts, they'll say, I didn't believe in this thing either. I thought it was just a legend too, until I saw it. And let me tell you, it's not just a legend. There is a horrible animal out there. They're terrified of this animal.
Although Dr. Orrin has not seen the creature for himself, 10 years of data collected in the field have led him to believe the Mapengwe may be a prehistoric creature thought to be extinct.
Suddenly a light went off in my head. I said, my God, this could only be a ground sloth. Well, this is perfectly extraordinary, because if we can suddenly drag out of the Amazon basin by its ear South America's largest land mammal, unknown to science until 1995 or 1996 or 1997. What else is out there? How incredibly all-embracing our ignorance is.
The giant sloth is not the only supposedly extinct mammal to turn up in recent months. In Malaysia and in Israel, we are following up on reports that giant humanoid creatures have been discovered there as well.
Coming up, ghosts on the battlefield.
Gettysburg is probably the most haunted battlefield.
Then, will the Earth destroy us?
This is not one person's problem. This is everyone's problem.
And the U.S. government has plans for extraterrestrial contact.
More Americans died during the Civil War than in both World Wars and Vietnam combined. And no single battle exacted a greater human toll than Gettysburg. Many of the soldiers who drew their last agonizing breaths on that field were buried where they fell. Today, the battlefield at Gettysburg is an historic monument, but it is also America's largest unmarked graveyard. And not surprisingly, many ghosts are said to haunt its hallowed ground.
There's a special feeling here at Gettysburg.
When you come here, it's almost like going into an eye of a hurricane.
A lot of the people that were killed here were killed very violently, very suddenly, and many of them literally bled to death on the battlefields.
Their lives were cut short, suddenly and horribly. And perhaps that's why a great deal of psychic energy remains in places like Gettysburg.
It's the little Pennsylvania town that changed the course of American history. Nearly 200,000 fought here in July 1863, and by the end of the three-day battle, more than 50,000 soldiers were lost. It was the turning point of the Civil War, and is still, according to some, a pivotal location for paranormal investigators. In his book, author and Civil War enthusiast Mark Nesbitt has collected reports of paranormal activity by modern-day visitors to the battlefield.
The Phantom Regiment is one that's been seen several times by several different people, sometimes in groups. They see a regiment lined up out in the middle of a field. They are maneuvering, they wander around, they begin to march, they march off into the woods and then vanish. This has been seen a number of times.
Beyond the ghost stories, there are strange photographs that seem to have captured tangible evidence of a paranormal energy here.
I actually didn't believe in ghosts until I started taking pictures, and one showed up in my picture. It's the first time I actually believed there is something out there. I looked at it and I was shocked, and I said, Tim, I think we captured a ghost.
I think a lot of people just don't want to admit they believe in ghosts because it doesn't sound like something respectable.
Charles Emmons has been a professor of sociology at Gettysburg College since 1974. He believes that the psychic trauma of 1863 may endure today in the form of residual haunting and is not just limited to the battlefield.
This is Pennsylvania Hall. During the battle, it was used by both sides as a hospital. 4 or 5 different people independently reported seeing a soldier walking around on the top of that cupola on Pennsylvania Hall. And I interviewed a student who had walked by there about 11 o'clock at night. He was very upset about the experience. He was not trying to hoax. He didn't want it to happen. He was obviously upset.
And inside, strange haunting images pervade.
2 administrators went down the elevator, punched the button for the first floor. It didn't work properly. They went to the basement instead, and when the doors
opened to reveal not a scene that was cleaned up for storage, but a scene out of Time and Reason, a hospital scene from the time of the battle. They punched frantically at the buttons to get them out of this hell that they had descended into, and
kept punching the buttons and eventually got up out of there.
But most of Gettysburg's ghostly encounters occur here, on the battlefield where 51,000 men died.
Gettysburg probably, as far as I'm concerned, is probably the most haunted battlefield that I've come across so far.
Paranormal investigator Dale Kaczmarek was asked to accompany a sightings team to the battlefield for a nighttime surveillance.
This area seems to be one of the several different locations that's very active as far as paranormal activity. A lot of loss of life would have occurred right here.
Among the tools of his trade are a Geiger counter, magnetometer, and other highly sensitive electronic devices that will register anomalous energy in the area. Our sightings camera was equipped with a special night vision lens to record in low light conditions.
Most likely what I'm picking up are small pockets of anomalies, little slight deviations in magnetic field that might indicate a presence of some kind.
Kaczmarek spent several hours taking readings in an area known as the Triangular Field. This is the site where Confederate soldiers began the charge on Little Round Top.
Some of the bloodiest battles took place along this ridge. Right there, I got a real high reading, real high static discharge reading right here. Really no reason for it. There's no way static should be built up out here. Nothing to attract static electricity or negative ions. Got another reading right by the rock over here, which was approximately 20 on the scale.
Meter peaks and anomalous readings continued until dawn.
I think it's very interesting out there, especially at the Triangular Field. We got a lot of interesting readings out there, including a lot of disturbances with the negative ion detector. I believe the area is infested, the word I like to use, infested by ghosts. Not only because of the trauma that's taken place here due to the battle, but surrounding the battle and the poor sanitary conditions, things of that nature. It's a location that leads itself to the existence and possibility of ghosts.
Residual haunting also seemed to be present in the inn where the sightings team stayed. The Farnsworth House, built in 1816, had been an ad hoc infantry position during the war.
These particular men were sharpshooters. They were most likely infantry soldiers. They were Confederate. They came into the house, maybe the door was unlocked. They climbed the stairs. The vantage point and the most protection would serve would be the garret, which is the attic. They flew open the door. They laid down on their bellies. They had a great position. They were actually firing and killing Union soldiers in the Jenny Wade.
The name of a neighboring inn. When the soldiers were captured, one of them was playing a mouth harp, a popular instrument of the time. Guests claim they hear his music still, and Patty claims she's seen the ghost of one of the men.
I got a very fleeting glimpse of him. He's a very tall, willowy young man, about maybe 17. If you looked at him and didn't know your age, you would think he was like 13, 14 years old.
Despite credible eyewitnesses and new electronic data gathering methods, Professor Emmons believes we may never be able to scientifically prove the existence of the ghosts of Gettysburg.
There are other ways of knowing ghosts. If you have the experience, a kind of religious, supernatural experience, it does something to you. There's just some sense of awe that tells you that something is happening here. And I don't know how exactly you study that scientifically. We may have to go beyond science to understand this phenomenon.
For now, the spirits of the men who fought here can best be captured when you stand on the battlefield and feel the sense of history.
I think since there was a lot of violence, especially the ones that were just literally ripped to pieces, I think they'll be remain for a very, very long time.
Most Civil War battlefields do not survive as historic sites. They've been plowed up, paved over, and built upon. But beneath the concrete and steel of our modern age, the echoes of the past remain. Many people believe that if you listen closely, you can hear them still.
Next, a sightings update. The Earth seeks revenge, and we may have sealed our fate.
Through pollution, we could be very well ensuring our own extinction.
Recently, Sightings brought you alarming statistics about new and deadly viruses breaking out around the world. Proponents of the Gaia theory suggest that these new viruses have been created by Earth in self-defense. It's a theory that's gaining wider acceptance, and now it appears that Mother Nature is fighting back at us with more than just viruses.
I think the problem is much more serious than we hear in the media because the story is still breaking.
Everyone is involved. This is not one person's problem. This is everyone's problem.
The Gaia theory, first espoused by James Lovelock, suggests that Earth is a living entity capable of fighting off infection. In our last report, we brought disturbing evidence that the infection is us.
By cutting away and disrupting the balance, you have, in effect, Gaia's revenge. The ecosystem fights back, and it attacks the people. It harms them with disease and drives them out.
According to Gaia theorists, Mother Earth's #1 enemy is overpopulation.
We are the threat. We are the problem. There are 5 billion of us on the planet. There is a 250 billion pounds of human flesh on this planet.
And the flesh is weak. We are pouring billions of tons of garbage and chemicals into Gaia. Her immune system is badly deteriorating. Participants at a recent World Wildlife Symposium warned Gaia is struggling just to maintain the status quo.
Some of us were seeing that animals were getting sick and dying. Others were seeing that there are definite developmental effects, that birds had twisted beaks, that animals were developing tumors all over them.
Each and every year, 435 billion pounds of man-made chemicals are released into our world's ever-weakening environment. Recent studies suggest that these chemicals are disrupting hormone production, impairing the reproductive cycle of many animals. And we are one of those animals. According to one study, male sperm counts have dropped 40% since World War II.
The trend is unequivocal that male sperm counts have been dropping. And that could be the underlying explanation for the increase in infertility in men, but that will not explain why they're dropping. And that's the big question. What's going on out there?
This is what's going on out there, according to Gaia theorists. Since Gaia cannot absorb everything we feed into it, Gaia must attack the source. It's us against the world. The first warning signals that this is the new reality are occurring here in the befouled waters of Lake Apopka in Florida. Wildlife biologist Tim Gross discovered that many alligators, turtles, and fish in the lake are neither male nor female. Their sexual development is mutating.
The effects that we're seeing that are quite dramatic are effects on the developing embryo. So in other words, these concentrations are deposited in the eggs during the development of the egg in mom. They're quite toxic to an embryo, and they form major alterations in the sexual differentiation.
There are signs that these kinds of genetic disturbances are on the increase throughout the United States. Biologists are beginning to see what they refer to as gender warping occurring in a wide variety of animal species. Is this yet another weapon of Gaia's revenge? If males are not male and females are not female, they cannot reproduce and are therefore only one generation away from extinction. How far, then, are we from the same fate?
I think those people who say that the effects on wildlife are isolated events and will have no effect on humans are being overly reassuring.
Hormones are basically ubiquitous. In other words, they're shared by all animal species. in that the hormones that control reproduction in alligators and turtles also control reproduction in humans. That is rather devastating because it can create major fertility problems in the human population.
This affects all of us because some of these contaminants are present in all of our food and in our drinking water. A chemical present in our food and in our water can have potentially disrupting effects on a fetus, on any of us as adults. Through pollution, we could be very well ensuring our own extinction.
But studies, some sponsored by chemical companies, conclude that the Earth and its inhabitants are resilient and will not suffer long-term effects. Infertility expert Dr. Michael Zinman is not convinced.
Exposing a pregnant woman to a variety of so-called benign, no-problem chemicals have turned out to not be so benign and cause long-term effects in their offspring and affected their offspring's ability to have offspring.
By polluting Gaia, have we sealed our own fate? Has Earth become so riddled with the cancer of chemical waste that there's no cure in sight?
A large number of the public will believe this data, will take it to heart very seriously, and be very concerned. Their biggest question then immediately after that is, okay, there's a problem, how do I clean it up? That's where it's depressing because I don't know how to clean it up. I don't know of any research indicating how we clean it up. Our cleanup methods currently are sort of bury it or hide it or just let it go for a long time and hopefully it'll decay and disappear.
The problem is the average person on the street is not well enough informed to get worried about it. If people could become educated about the potential threats to their health and that of their family and children, then that's probably a way to get them more involved.
Since humankind began, there has never been a time of global peace and understanding. Political, philosophical, and religious differences continue to divide nations. But perhaps Gaia's ultimate gift to us will be a global peace created by the universal battle to save this planet.
Next, if extraterrestrials don't exist, why do government agencies have plans for UFO emergencies?
Our guiding principle is basically protecting the populace.
If, as the U.S. government maintains, flying saucers don't exist, why are there government protocols about what to do in the event of a UFO crash? If there is no threat, why do disaster preparedness manuals used by the Federal Emergency Management Agency include information about what to do in the event of an extraterrestrial encounter? Stardate 2317.4. Encounter with a civilization unknown to the Federation. Proceed with extreme caution, and above all, do not interfere with this newfound society. That's UFO protocol Star Trek style, where men and women boldly go in search of life beyond our planet. Stardate 1995. Encounter with a UFO unknown to the United States government. Since the possibility cannot be ignored that UFOs reported may be hostile, it is imperative that sightings be reported rapidly, factually, and as completely as possible. This is not another prime directive from the fantasy world of Star Trek. It is official United States Air Force UFO protocol, taken directly from the pages of this operations manual. And the Air Force is not the only federal agency with a written policy on close encounters.
We tell them, don't touch, don't come in contact with, isolate, be friendly, be solicitous, display no hostility, and take very good precaution that we do not become involved if we do not have to.
William Kramer is a district fire chief in Cincinnati, Ohio, who has literally written the book on what to do in the event of a UFO crash. It's part of the Fire Officer's Guide to Disaster Control, a training manual used in all 50 states and reportedly endorsed by FEMA.
As far as we know, this is the first time this subject of unidentified flying objects, has actually been incorporated into a larger, full-length text that's being used in a very serious way by the nation's fire officials.
But why does Chief Kramer believe that a chapter on flying saucers is essential to his disaster training textbook?
One of the reasons is the obvious real panic that exists when people feel they're being threatened by some unexplained phenomenon, including UFOs. It's very possible that an alien visitor could wreak some sort of havoc on a given populace.
When Sightings asked FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, to comment on the manual's Chapter 13, the UFO chapter, their response was typically terse, stating FEMA does not endorse or embrace the information in that chapter. But Sightings has learned through FEMA's own disaster defense planning guide that the agency not only assigns Chapter 13 of the Disaster Control Manual as required reading, but also tests its own disaster officials on its contents.
One of the reasons there's probably a government cover-up is that the whole world order would change if we suddenly realized we are not alone. Our entire social order is based on the fact that we are the whole sum total of life's existence right here on this planet.
The wholesale disruption of planet Earth would be the ultimate foreign policy disaster. According to investigator George Knapp, it is a possibility that did not escape the attention of at least one former president.
It's very curious. I know of 3 speeches in particular that he made. Some say it's as high as 5, in which he says, wouldn't it be something if we were suddenly threatened by some alien force, we'd all get together. And of course, he's making this statement to Gorbachev. He made it to the United Nations. What kind of message was he trying to get across? I have a hard time believing that it's just a coincidence.
While President Reagan may have hinted at the possibility of alien spacecraft, other federal agencies have not been so circumspect. UFO protocols do not stop with the Air Force and FEMA. The FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, has its own guidelines. And NASA must abide by a little-known federal law that any astronaut who comes in contact with an extraterrestrial must be quarantined.
We know for a fact that there are various forms of radiation that exist in outer space. It's very possible that a visitor from outer space could bring this type of radiation to this country. There is, in fact, a national law that mandates the quarantining of any astronaut or other person who has actually encountered some sort of an unidentified flying object or has been involved in some sort of an encounter that's out of the ordinary.
The more you fly in space, the more you see an incredible amount of things out there. Spaceflight itself broadens your horizons to the point which you kind of open up to possibilities.
Dr. Story Musgrave has been a NASA scientist and astronaut for 27 years and is a veteran of 5 space shuttle missions. He believes that UFO protocols are in place not because we have already been visited, but because eventually we will be.
That's what spaceflight is about. It's about exploration. It's about pursuit, discovery of the unknown. I can see no reason that that would be classified in any way, and I wouldn't let it be.
These UFO protocols are based on the assumption that a UFO contact will be a threat, be belligerent, and will cause widespread panic. But what if the UFOs come in peace? Will we be as prepared to welcome them as we are to declare war?
Sightings has expanded its America Online area. Keyword Sightings when you log on for access to Sightings stories, images, and events. To subscribe to America Online, call 1-800-591-3344. And you can still reach Sightings 24 hours a day at 1-900-933-7444.
Until next time, remember, no mystery is closed to an open mind. For Sightings, I'm Tim White.